I'd like to now recognize Sharmagh Mardi for her testimony.
Chairman Smith, Chairman McGovern, and esteemed members of this commission, I thank you for this unique opportunity to testify before you on behalf of the victims of Nagorno-Karabakh. I am a lawyer with the Center for Truth and Justice, a human rights organization committed to collecting first-hand testimonial evidence of war crimes. We have collected over 500 testimonies from victims and eyewitnesses. The Center for Truth and Justice is ready to make our open-source catalog and testimonies available for members of this commission and the United States Congress. Today, in this room are several victims. We call them warriors for justice, who have found the courage to come forward with their truth. I have the distinct privilege of telling their stories. First, I will recognize Father Hrant Hovhannisyan. For 44 days, he was surrounded by Azerbaijani troops as he held communion in Dadivank Monastery, which dates back to the 4th century. He stayed to protect the ancient church and all its artifacts and cross stones. As a result of his insistence to protect his church and people, he was placed on the terrorist list by Azerbaijan. In 2023, after being starved for 9 months under blockade, a bomb fell in his house and the father was severely injured. Only a couple of days after surgery, with stitches in his torso and back, dressed in civilian clothing, he left in a car with 4 other members of his family and 5 children to safety. Without food, water, or medicine, they traveled over 35 hours to escape Armenia. Today, despite Azerbaijan's goal of destroying all Armenian heritage and removing Armenians from their lands, he stands with his people in defense of culture, church, and religion. Next is Goharine Hovoyan. Today marks the 1-year anniversary of the bombing of her home and the death of her 16-year-old child. She is dressed in black in mourning the killing of her son. She and her 13-year-old have undergone numerous surgeries. Their bodies are still full of shrapnel. The most harrowing part of her story is the search for a coffin in the chaos of war to transport the body of her 16-year-old son to Armenia, as they escaped to safety. The damage to her hand and body is so extensive that simple tasks like washing the dishes are almost impossible. But the worst pain is the loss of her son. She says, "I cried for the loss of others, but I never thought it would happen to me. May God spare all mothers of this pain, the pain of losing your child." With us is a young person whose name will not be stated here to avoid retribution from Azerbaijan. This person is the child of one of the hostages that is currently being held in dungeons of Baku without due process. In September 2023, Azerbaijan released a list of their 300 most wanted Armenians. Azerbaijani authorities illegally arrested and imprisoned members of Nagorno-Karabakh's leadership, as well as civilians. Among them is the father of this person, who continues to be held in Baku on fabricated allegations without due process. Prisoners cannot choose their counsel. They are not allowed visitors, and every minute of their phone calls are monitored by Azerbaijani authorities. Our young warrior has had only 2 communications with their father, who is not well. The Center for Truth and Justice interviewed 30 prisoners of war, and our findings showed that Armenians in the dungeons of Azerbaijan are subjected to prolonged physical and psychological torture and inhuman treatment. Finally, I'd like to highlight Lala Abgaryan. In September 2022, she saw her sister's image on Telegram. The footage showed that Gayane was filmed after she was captured, tortured, and mutilated by the Azerbaijani military forces. They filmed the entire violent incident and posted on social media for 5 consecutive days. The video shows Gayane's body stripped naked, her chest exposed where the name of the Azerbaijani brigade written, her eyes gouged and replaced with stones, her legs cut off, her ears cut off, and her severed finger showed into her mouth as Azerbaijani soldier kicks her mutilated body. Gayane had 4 children at the time of her murder. Lala is here to say that her sister was not the only victim of atrocities committed by Azerbaijani forces towards Armenian women. Azerbaijan must be held accountable, otherwise they will be emboldened to continue committing violence with impunity. In 2023, Center for Truth and Justice published a report warning that all indicators point in one direction: the looming genocide of Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. The report warned the United States and European Union that hate speech spouted by Ilham Aliyev and his administration had two goals: to remove all Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh by force, by starvation, or by killing, and use war and violence against the Republic of Armenia to invade and occupy the land. Both of these scenarios have tragically come true. Today, for the first time in history, Nagorno-Karabakh stands devoid of Armenians, and parts of Armenia remain occupied by Azerbaijani military forces. I urge the United States government and the international community to take decisive action and hold Azerbaijan accountable for crimes against humanity. We ask the United States to demand the immediate and unconditional release of all Armenian hostages and prisoners of war, and the right for indigenous Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh to return to their homes and lands. Thank you again for allowing me to present testimony today. Hearing the stories of the victims is one form of justice. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you so very much, Ms. Krikorian. I would just note parenthetically that one of my great heroes in human rights has been Natan Sharansky, the great Jewish refusenik. He made a very strong statement years ago, and I actually went to the camp where he was, Perm Camp 35 in the Ural Mountains, back in the 1980s. He said, you cannot have accountability if you do not chronicle the abuse. And you are doing that, and you are gathering those testimonies, and that will have a huge impact going forward. And I can't thank you enough for that. And it has to be a very hard job to hear about the atrocities.